For purposes of illustration, imagine that this visual was actually our world. To the left, we have my castle, Castle Carmichael, and to the right is your castle. All right. And we have, our families have lived here for centuries. And over time, centuries ago now, some of our relatives have made a deal in which we've divided the beautiful territory between our castles right down the middle so that some parts of the river are on your property and some parts of the river are on mine. Thus, as you can see, the white line that goes straight down the middle is considered to be the status quo, the present negotiated status. And then the horizontal arrow, the arrow that goes between the two castles, could be seen as possible outcomes of future negotiations. Now, as you can see, there are risks and rewards likely in all negotiations. So, of course, the reward would be if you could push far enough in negotiations that you might actually extend your castle's boundaries past the existing status quo right down the middle and closer to my castle. And let's say you're thinking that you would really love to have full control over the rivers, that you might have late night boat cruises. Well, in which case, the reward towards a good, strong negotiation would be that you might achieve more territory. However, there's also a good bit of risk associated with this negotiation. Let's say you've pushed too hard or too fast towards my castle, and I felt extremely threatened by this. I, in fact, wanted the river for myself, felt like we had a status quo agreement, and then you took that away by pushing very hard. In which case, there's a high risk that I might push back or that the bargain might fail because I feel threatened and therefore threaten military action or use military action. So there's a really kind of delicate balance with two states that are both interested in gaining more rewards at the expense of another, and therefore could lead to a high risk that could break out between the two. What's important to understand in interactions with these two castles, in yours and versus mine, is that there is a potential in which both states would be willing to compromise. They would be willing to come to some sort of solution. The bargaining range, the time in which it's usually close to the status quo, because both states would want a little bit of revision, but more towards their favor. So there's not going to be a dramatic revision that both states would be okay with. Instead, it tends to be close to the status quo, but there generally is a range in which bargaining can be achieved. The problem with this, however, is that you don't want to not ask for things. You want the rewards of gaining stuff, but you also are always concerned about the risk of asking for too much and threatening the other state in a movement towards war. And so social scientists are really concerned with how you find, under what conditions does bargaining fail and conflict erupt. And we've determined that there are at least 3 conditions that you have to watch out for. The first is the condition of incomplete information. Again, returning to the playing cards analogy. In every board game and every card game, there is a sense that you have secret information. You have information about yourself. In a card game, it is in fact the cards in your hand that another actor is not privy to. And as a result, you are trying to make choose your best action going forward based on the interest of trying to win a game or the interest in trying to win a negotiation, and you have secret information that you are withholding to your advantage. However, you must act based on an anticipated secret information in the other person's hand. So as a result, incomplete information, the larger that body of incomplete information is, the higher level of uncertainty in negotiations and the more likely for negotiations to potentially fail. Second condition under which fighting might erupt is based on communication issues. Now, let's say that you have, as an actor, and myself in my castle, I've determined how I want to act. I'm determined that I do not want to allow you to push forward and claim the entire river for yourself. Even if I have resolve, it's hard for me to demonstrate that resolve effectively. And meanwhile, from your side, you really can't tell how much I love my river claim and how much I'm willing to fight for it. And so, really, there a lot of breakdowns we find in terms of negotiation come with even when people feel that they know that they have the capabilities to negotiate a good deal, and they're resolved in negotiating that. A lot of times they have difficulty fully, credibly communicating their position to the other person. The third and final problem are commitment problems. A lot of times, now this is the expectation of the future that changes the negotiation in the present. Specifically, if I find that you and I have agreed to a bargaining deal, something that fits within the bargaining range, I may not accept it, even though it's to my advantage to do so instead of going to war, because I do not believe that you will credibly commit to that in the future, and or I think it will advantage you too much so that in the future I might be weaker. All this to say that what happens in the present is oftentimes dictated by what could be to happen in the future. So how might we avoid these kind of problems? Well, ultimately, it kind of goes back to the intuitive strategy that takes place within a card game. You want to, in some ways, if you're trying to diminish uncertainty, reduce uncertainty, and come up with kind of a credible communication to the other one of your resolve, as well as potentially get over kind of the concerns about the future. A simple idea would be to reveal some of the information in your hand, to show some of your cards. And such strategies were talked about in the textbook, for example, costly hand tying, kind of saying to your domestic audience as well as to the other players in the national system that you are resolved to something because you're willing to put some sort of cost out there in order to get it. The negative to this is that actually adds cost to your cost benefit analysis going on in choosing your actions within the negotiation. And that's why, and we'll talk about this in more detail in the next module, that's why third parties play such a key role oftentimes in successful negotiations that prevent conflicts or at least resolve them. Because imagine in a card game that you want to determine that you're in fact committed to a given action, but don't want to reveal your cards fully to the other actors. There might be a third, more neutral party that you could show your cards to, thus showing that you're not cheating or lying in a case, and the other actor could as well. This has been one of kind of the ways in which the international system has attempted to reduce conflict.